General Marcus Williams, a 48-year-old black veteran respected for his exemplary service in the U.S. Army, is traveling to a small town to attend a ceremony honoring fallen soldiers. This is not just any ceremony. It is a special commemoration organized to pay tribute to war heroes, including several close comrades of Marcus who gave their lives in service to their country. The general has always felt an immense responsibility towards these men and women. It is for them that he continued to rise through the ranks, proudly bearing the honors that, for him, belonged to an entire generation of forgotten soldiers. His immaculate uniform, tailored with precision, bears the silent scars of countless military campaigns around the world. Each medal on his chest tells a story of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. The Medal of Honor for his bravery on the battlefield in Afghanistan, the Silver Star for his exemplary conduct during a rescue mission in Iraq, and the Purple Heart for the wounds he sustained while defending his brothers in arms under heavy fire. At 48, his features are marked by years of service, but his deep brown eyes still betray a liveliness and determination that have always defined him. As he heads to this ceremony, Marcus is not seeking personal honors. For him, it is a sacred duty, a promise he made to always remind the world of the price of freedom and the value of lives sacrificed. Despite his rank and national recognition, he remains humble, aware that behind every medal is a story of survival, camaraderie, and sometimes loss. As he arrives in this small town, a peaceful place far from the battlefields, Marcus cannot help but feel a certain nostalgia. He remembers the early days of his career, where he came from, and the obstacles he overcame. As a young black soldier, he had to face discrimination within the army, but his talent, work ethic, and leadership quickly set him apart. Now a general, he is living proof that perseverance and merit can overcome prejudice, though the road is often long and fraught with obstacles. As General Marcus Williams steps out of his official vehicle, a sleek service car subtly displaying military insignia, he is immediately noticed by Officer Greg Thompson, a newly assigned white police officer in this quiet town. Greg Thompson is a man in his 30s, full of ambition but also arrogance. His arrival in the community had sparked mixed opinions. Some believed he would bring new energy to the police force, while others saw in him a certain harshness, impatience, and, most of all, a lack of understanding of the subtleties of local life. That morning, Greg watches Marcus from his patrol car. At the first glance, his suspicions are aroused. All he sees is a black man driving an expensive vehicle, which is enough to trigger an unjustified sense of distrust in him. Greg does not know the stature or the background of General Williams, nor the sacrifices this man has made for his country. All he sees is a stranger he believes does not belong in such a position. Arrogance and prejudice cloud his judgment. Determined to intervene, Officer Thompson turns on his sirens and approaches Marcus's vehicle, his demeanor stern and resolute. Passers-by, intrigued by the scene, begin to slow down. No one knows exactly what is happening, but the tension in the air is palpable. Thompson approaches Marcus, his hand resting on his weapon, a gesture that speaks volumes about his intentions. There is neither politeness nor respect in his approach. His gaze is cold, suspicious, almost accusatory. Without even a hello, Officer Thompson speaks harshly to Marcus. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." His tone is commanding, leaving little room for discussion. Marcus, initially surprised by the sudden order, remains calm. He is all too familiar with such situations. He has experienced others in his career where simply being a black man in a certain space was enough to provoke hostile behavior. Yet this time, he is in his own country, wearing a uniform that represents his commitment to defending that very country, and he still hopes that this encounter is merely a misunderstanding. "Excuse me, officer, but could you tell me why you're asking me to exit my vehicle?" Marcus responds with controlled calm, his voice filled with dignity. Officer Thompson, having not recognized the impeccable uniform or the decorations on Marcus's chest, frowns. To him, the answer is clear. A black man in such a high-end military vehicle must be an imposter. "You're suspected of stealing this vehicle. Now get out immediately, or I'll make you," he says, his tone growing harsher, almost threatening. Marcus remains impassive, but a wave of indignation rises within him. He could present his papers, prove his status right away. But a question gnaws at him. Why, once again, must he prove who he is? Why is he judged guilty at first glance simply because of the color of his skin? His legendary calm, forged by years of tense situations on war grounds, does not abandon him, but inside, a quiet frustration grows. Despite General Marcus Williams' dignity and unshakable calm, who tries to explain the situation to Officer Thompson, the latter refuses to listen. Greg Thompson, blinded by his arrogance and racist prejudice, wants nothing to do with it. To him, this is just another individual who, in his eyes, doesn't fit the image of someone legitimately behind the wheel of such a prestigious service vehicle. The general's words, though measured and clear, seem to fall on deaf ears. "Officer, I am General Marcus Williams, here for the commemoration ceremony." "You are making a grave mistake," Marcus tries again, hoping to awaken some semblance of reason in Thompson. His words are heavy with patience but also frustration. He has been fighting these distrustful looks, these instant judgments based solely on the color of his skin for years. Yet, despite his rank, despite his visible decorations, despite his perfectly immaculate uniform, Thompson does not relent. "I don't care who you claim to be," the officer snaps, his tone sharp. He moves closer, pulling out the handcuffs from his belt with exaggerated authority. "I told you to get out of the vehicle. You are under arrest." At that moment, Marcus feels a wave of humiliation wash over him. Never, despite all the battles he fought, despite the desperate situations he found himself in, had he ever felt so powerless in his own country, in front of those who are supposed to protect him. He knows he could insist, protest further, but he also knows, sadly, that in this situation the more he resists, the worse things are likely to get. Without saying another word, Marcus raises his hands slightly, a gesture of submission that he never thought he'd have to make while in uniform on American soil. Thompson, thinking he has control of the situation, seizes the opportunity and, with no delicacy, places the handcuffs around Marcus's wrists. The metallic clink echoes coldly in the air, a sound heavy with symbolism for the general, who finds himself, for the first time in his life, publicly humiliated in such a way. The bystanders, who had been watching the scene from a distance, are now frozen in a sort of disbelief. Some recognize the general's uniform, his medals, and realize that he is not just an ordinary citizen. But despite the shock and visible discomfort on their faces, very few dare to intervene. A heavy atmosphere settles over the street. A few people whisper to one another, torn between indignation and the fear of getting involved in a situation with the police. An elderly man, visibly moved, steps timidly to the edge of the sidewalk. He takes a step toward Officer Thompson, his voice trembling with indignation. "Officer, you're making a mistake. This man is a hero. Look at his medals." But his voice is lost in the surrounding noise. Thompson, focused on his task of publicly humiliating Marcus, pays no attention to the attempted intervention. Marcus, now handcuffed, stands in the middle of the street, surrounded by a small crowd of silent witnesses, their expressions grave. The public humiliation is palpable. His uniform, which symbolizes honor and sacrifice, is tarnished by the injustice being done to him. A man who has served his country with loyalty and courage for decades is now being treated like a criminal because of a simple prejudice. Passers-by are filming the scene, some reluctantly, but the majority too shocked to look away. They know this moment is representative of something far larger than a mere police error. It is the reflection of a system that, time and time again, judges men and women of color not by their actions, but by their appearance. Thompson, however, seems indifferent to this reality. He continues with his mission, likely believing he is doing his duty, but in truth, he embodies a glaring injustice. Just as Marcus Williams, humiliated and handcuffed, is about to be forcibly taken to the police station by Officer Thompson, the sound of vehicles suddenly echoes in the distance. These are powerful, distinctive engines, the kind used in official vehicles for large ceremonies. Soon, a military convoy, consisting of several cars with American flags and Army insignia, stops abruptly a few meters from the scene. The doors open and several soldiers in impeccable uniforms step out, some visibly high-ranking officers. The contrast between the solemnity of the uniforms and the shameful situation Marcus finds himself in is striking. Among them is Commander Smith, a man in his 50s, a veteran from the same division as Marcus and respected for his leadership and commitment. Smith's face shifts from surprise to palpable indignation in mere seconds as he grasps the situation unfolding before him. General Marcus Williams, his colleague and friend, a man who has served his country with unwavering devotion, is handcuffed like a common criminal simply because of the prejudices of an ignorant officer. Without hesitation, Smith steps forward quickly and determinedly, followed closely by the other soldiers accompanying him. With a serious expression, he approaches Officer Thompson, who, still unaware of the newcomer's identities, stiffens. Thompson, still convinced of the righteousness of his actions, tries to maintain an air of authority, but something in the way these soldiers carry themselves, the firmness in their gazes, begins to shake his confidence. "What's going on here?" asks Commander Smith in a loud, authoritative voice, cutting off any attempt at justification from Thompson. Officer Thompson, already uncomfortable with this unexpected arrival, falls silent for a moment, searching for his words. This man is under arrest. He's suspected of stealing this vehicle, he finally articulates, his tone somewhat less assured than before. Smith, with a piercing look, then turns toward Marcus, still handcuffed. The scene he sees deeply outrages him. This is a general he knows well, a man he respects greatly, and he is furious to see him treated this way. In a cold voice, he addresses Thompson again, articulating each word with unyielding firmness. "You've just arrested General Marcus Williams, the guest of honor at the military ceremony you're supposed to protect today. You've made a monumental mistake, and I order you to release him immediately." The soldiers around Smith remain silent, but their erect posture and commanding presence leave little room for dispute. They are all outraged but disciplined. Smith's natural authority and the gravity of his words make it instantly clear to all witnesses that Thompson acted out of pure ignorance and discrimination. Thompson, pale, suddenly realizes the gravity of his situation. The bystanders, too, begin to murmur with growing intensity, gradually understanding that they've witnessed a blatant act of injustice. Some, who had hesitated to intervene, now realize that Marcus was not just a regular citizen, but a military hero unjustly treated. With trembling hands, Thompson awkwardly retrieves the keys to the handcuffs, his original arrogance having completely dissipated. He approaches Marcus, now unable to meet the general's gaze, and quickly releases his wrists. The air is heavy with silence, each movement of the officer fraught with shame and embarrassment. Once freed, Marcus slowly straightens up, his calm still intact despite the humiliation he has just endured. His gaze briefly rests on Thompson, but he says nothing. His silence is more powerful than any speech. Commander Smith then steps toward Marcus and, in a gesture of deep respect, shakes his hand. "I am truly sorry this happened, Marcus. You should never have been treated this way." Marcus slightly nods his head, his face still dignified, but his eyes betray a silent pain. "This isn't the first time, Smith, but I hope it will be the last." The soldiers surrounding the general exchange meaningful glances. They know that this kind of injustice, while shocking, is unfortunately not new for men like Marcus, who have given everything for their country. Their respect for him is only strengthened. Meanwhile, Officer Thompson, now completely discredited, slowly retreats, trying to find a way out of this situation without worsening his case. But the expression on Commander Smith's face and the presence of the other officers leave little doubt. His actions will not go without consequence. The passers-by begin to timidly applaud General Marcus. This simple gesture, yet filled with gratitude, speaks volumes about the shift in public opinion that has occurred within minutes. This is no longer an unjust arrest, but a moment of redemption for a man whose honor and dignity have withstood the test of ordinary racism. Now free, Marcus turns on his heels with his fellow soldiers, ready to join the ceremony in his honor. But the echo of this public humiliation, the weight of what he has just experienced, resonates in everyone's mind. Commander Smith's intervention has restored order, but it has also revealed how easily injustices can still occur, even against the most deserving individuals. Upon reaching the entrance to the ceremony, General Marcus Williams is greeted by a group of high-ranking officials and influential civilians, all visibly uncomfortable with what has just transpired. The contrast between the elegance of the event and the injustice he suffered just minutes ago is striking. The noise of the conversations fades as he arrives, and all eyes turn to him with a mix of respect, guilt, and discomfort. A colonel, tasked with overseeing the event, quickly approaches Marcus, his face marked by embarrassment and shame. Every step he takes seems weighed down by the gravity of the situation. "General Williams, we owe you an apology. What happened is unacceptable," he says in a grave but respectful voice, barely avoiding lowering his gaze. "I promise you, this will not go unaddressed." The colonel is sweating nervously. He knows that such an error, especially against someone as respected as Marcus, is not just a stain on the event, but on the integrity of the military itself. Marcus fixes him for a moment, his face impassive, but his eyes betray a deep thought. He could yield to anger, but he knows it would serve no purpose. His words are slow, measured, yet carry a truth that cannot be ignored. "This is not about apologies, Colonel," he begins, his voice calm but firm. "It's about change. You can make promises today, but actions must follow. Too many men and women like me live this over and over again, without those promises turning into actions." His words strike like a sledgehammer, not only for the colonel, but for everyone present. The truth of his statement is undeniable, and in that moment, everyone realizes this is not an isolated incident. What Marcus has just experienced is a reality shared by so many others, a reality that can no longer be ignored or swept under the rug with easy excuses. The colonel nods, clearly moved by the sincerity and weight of Marcus's words. His face tightens slightly, signaling his awakening. "You're right, General," he finally replies, his voice filled with an unusual humility for a man of his rank. "It's not enough to say it won't happen again. Concrete measures must be taken. I will make sure your words are not forgotten." The silence that follows is heavy with meaning. The colonel knows that in this simple interaction, he is witnessing something much larger than a military event, a fundamental reevaluation of the treatment of those, like Marcus, who have dedicated their lives to serving their country, yet still suffer from prejudice and discrimination. Without adding another word, Marcus slightly inclines his head, a gesture that could almost be seen as a form of acknowledgement, but still tinged with reserve. He knows the fight has just begun, and that what he has just said will not be enough to change deeply ingrained mindsets in certain institutions. But he has planted a seed, and that's all he can do for now. Without waiting any longer, Marcus resumes his walk toward the interior of the reception hall, surrounded by his soldiers. Their presence, silent yet imposing, is a reminder of the loyalty and respect they have for their general. To them, Marcus is not just a superior. He is a model of dignity and courage, someone who does not let injustice break him, even when it knocks at his door. Inside, the hall is magnificent, adorned with flags and medals that testify to the sacrifices and victories of the military present. Yet, despite the grandeur of the space, the air is thick with palpable tension. The guests, who had originally planned to celebrate this event with enthusiasm, are now aware that something far larger than the ceremony itself has happened outside. Eyes turn once again toward Marcus as he enters, this time with renewed admiration. Some of the officers present, though embarrassed by what transpired, also feel a deep pride. They know the injustice he suffered has only reinforced his leadership aura. Marcus is a man whose strength lies not only in his military actions, but also in his ability to face deeply unjust situations with a grace that cannot be ignored. As he progresses through the hall, he is greeted by many officers who extend their hands, awkwardly trying to erase the collective unease with gestures of respect. Marcus acknowledges them courteously, but his thoughts seem already elsewhere. He knows he is being watched more than ever, not only for his military accomplishments, but also for the way he confronts persistent and subtle discrimination. At the back of the hall, a podium awaits the general for his honorary speech. All eyes turn to him as he ascends the few steps leading to the podium. The hall becomes silent, hanging on his every word. Yet, before he even speaks, the silence that reigns is more eloquent than any words could be. Marcus, standing tall, overlooking the assembly, knows that this ceremony is now much more than a simple recognition of his service. It has become a symbol of a broader struggle, a fight for equality and justice that he and so many others must continue to wage, even after giving everything for their country. Before beginning his speech, Marcus takes a moment to survey the room, every face turned toward him with palpable expectation. He feels the weight of their gazes, those of his fellow soldiers, the officers, the civilians, but also the invisible weight of history that he carries within him. The silence thickens around him, filled with respect, but also with unspoken questions. What he is about to say now will surpass the simple honors of a ceremony. He is aware of this. Then, with a clear and confident voice, he begins. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we celebrate those who have served their country with honor and dedication. We are here to pay tribute to their courage, their sacrifice, and their unwavering commitment to defending freedom. He pauses briefly, his gaze sweeping over the audience. But allow me to remind you that true service does not end on the battlefield. True service is fighting for what is right, here at home, for our brothers, our sisters, our children. A discreet murmur spreads through the room. Marcus's words resonate with a deeper truth than what is typically heard on such occasions. He continues, his tone serious, but filled with quiet strength. I am proud to have served this country, he says, locking eyes with the assembly, but this country must also serve each of its citizens with justice and fairness. We cannot loudly proclaim our values of freedom and democracy abroad if here, in our own streets, we allow injustices to persist. If we allow men and women who have sacrificed everything to be treated with suspicion simply because of the color of their skin, the silence in the room deepens, almost palpable. Everyone is hanging on his words, aware that they are witnessing a historic moment, a statement that goes beyond mere military recognition. Today, I was arrested not because I committed a crime, but because I am perceived differently. Because, despite my accomplishments, there are people in this country who see me first as a black man before they see me as a general, before they see me as a human being. He lets a moment pass, allowing his words to sink into their minds. This reality, ladies and gentlemen, is not an anecdote. It is the daily life of so many citizens of this country, of so many soldiers like me who wore the uniform with pride, but who, once returned to civilian life, face prejudice and unfounded mistrust. The fight we must wage does not stop on distant battlefields. It must continue here at home. It must continue for justice, for dignity, for the equal rights of all citizens, regardless of their origin or appearance. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the room. Some guests, shaken by these hard-to-ignore truths, lower their heads. Others nod silently, united in their reflection. We've made progress, that's certain. But if today, a general like me can still be publicly humiliated, what about those who have no rank to assert, those who are not invited to these ceremonies? What happens in the shadows, away from the eyes? It is up to us to change that. Marcus's voice, though calm, vibrates with contained passion, a quiet strength that fills the room, infusing each word with the experience and weight of his life. True service is protecting all citizens, not just with weapons, but with just laws, open hearts, and a commitment to tear down the barriers of hate and ignorance. He briefly looks at the flags hanging around the room, symbols of freedom and courage. We wear this uniform to defend values, but these values must be lived in every street, every neighborhood, in every institution. What I experienced today must never happen again. And this will not be done with apologies or promises alone, but with concrete actions, reforms, and a change in mindset. The silence that follows is heavy, but not uncomfortable. It is the kind of silence that arises when truths are spoken plainly, and everyone understands the gravity of the moment. Marcus takes a breath before concluding. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here not only as a general, but as a man who believes in this country. I believe that we can be better, that we must be better. But that requires a commitment from each of us. This is not a fight for the oppressed alone. It is a fight for the very soul of this nation. So today I ask you to join me for justice, for equality, so that our country may live up to its ideals. Applause erupts in the room, initially timid, then growing more intense. But these are not mere polite claps. They carry with them an awakening, a deep respect for the truth that has just been spoken. Marcus stands for a moment longer, absorbing the reaction, but he does not smile. He knows this is just the beginning of a long road, a road he is prepared to continue, even if it is difficult. And as he leaves the podium, he knows his speech has made an impact, that he has planted a seed. Now, it remains to be seen whether it will take root. Outside, Agent Thompson, still reeling from the events, paces nervously. The reality of what has just transpired begins to catch up with him. His heart races, and sweat beads on his forehead. As he tries to regain his composure, he sees two senior officers approach him, their faces stern and determined. One of them, Captain Jenkins, a formidable man with harsh features, steps forward first, his gaze icy. Agent Thompson, he begins in a cutting voice, you must immediately surrender your badge and weapon. Thompson feels a wave of panic rise within him. His badge, his weapon, his entire career is at stake. His thoughts blur, and he begins to stammer out clumsy apologies. But I didn't know. It wasn't my intention, I assure you. It was just a misunderstanding. His words choke in his throat, his speech confused and desperate. But the two officers remain unmoved, impassive to his desperate attempts to defend himself. Captain Jenkins crosses his arms, not a shred of sympathy in his eyes. A misunderstanding, you say? He retorts, his voice as cold as ice, cutting through the air like a knife. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Thompson. You failed in your duty by acting out of prejudice. You made decisions based on stereotypes, on the color of a man's skin, without even bothering to think or verify the facts. This kind of behavior has no place in our ranks. Beside him, the other officer, Lieutenant Sanders, an older man whose gaze reflects solid experience and great integrity, nods gravely. We are here to serve and protect, Thompson, Sanders adds in a calm but firm voice. Not to judge and discriminate. Your actions today have not only tarnished your own reputation, but have also called into question the integrity of the entire police force. Thompson tries to defend himself again, panic growing more intense. But I thought. He looked like a suspect. I was just doing my job. Captain Jenkins locks eyes with him, cutting off his justification. No, Thompson. You failed in your duty. You failed the very principles you swore to defend when you put on this uniform. You chose to see a black man as a threat instead of seeing him as a citizen. Jenkins's words strike hard, leaving no room for ambiguity. Thompson, overwhelmed, lowers his eyes, aware that his defense is futile. He feels the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a leaden burden. Slowly, he takes his badge from his pocket, his trembling hands handing it over to Captain Jenkins, his gaze fixed on the ground. He knows there is nothing more to say, nothing more to do to undo his mistake. The captain takes the badge without a word, and the ensuing silence is heavy, almost suffocating. Thompson also removes his weapon from its holster and hands it over to Lieutenant Sanders, who accepts it with a solemn nod. We will open an internal investigation, Lieutenant Sanders declares calmly. But it is clear that your future in this unit is compromised. Thompson closes his eyes for a moment, unable to hide the shame that washes over him. He thinks of everything he has lost in an instant, his badge, his weapon, but also the honor and respect that came with his position. He understands that he's not just handing over objects, but a whole career built on years of service. Leave now, Thompson, Jenkins finally says, his voice devoid of any trace of pity. We'll contact you regarding the procedures to follow. Without another word, Thompson turns on his heel, his steps heavy and slow. Each step he takes away from the two officers feels like a march toward an inevitable downfall. He feels all eyes on him, the silent judgment of his colleagues who watch the scene from a distance. Rumors had surely already begun to spread within the ranks. As he walks away, he can't help but glance back one last time at Jenkins and Sanders, who are exchanging a few quiet words. He knows he will never see these men in uniform by his side again. He also knows, deep down, that this day will be etched in his memory as the moment everything changed. Agent Thompson, once confident and proud of his uniform, leaves the scene without a badge, without a weapon, and most importantly, without a future in this institution he had once so respected.